Everyone who comes in, we put a DNR on them. I said, so does that mean if his heart stops for whatever reason or he stops breathing, you'll just leave him to die? And she was like, yeah, but of course, resuscitating elderly people is a terrible thing. She'd been line dancing the night before. She was cooking in her kitchen, had a bit of a dizzy spell, went to hospital, and they killed her. At that point, we discovered that a new NICE guideline, NICE, a guideline had been put into place on April the 3rd, 2020, and it was called NG163, which was a COVID protocol, apparently. And when you read this protocol, the treatment for COVID, so if anyone goes in, they put them on this pathway, NG163, which involved the withdrawal of food, the withdrawal of fluids, the withdrawal of any essential medications, and the administration of Midazolam and morphine. Midazolam is a benzodiazepine, it's a sedative, and morphine is a painkiller. When you use those two things together, it depresses respiration. If you use them together consistently over a period of time via a syringe driver, which is a pump on the arm, it will lead to total depression of respiration, which is death. It says in the British National Formulary you must never use a benzodiazepine and an opioid together, which is what they were prescribing in this protocol, because it will kill people. The police were told if anyone comes to them reporting COVID injuries or COVID deaths, to not investigate, and if anyone comes to them reporting murders in hospitals and care homes and hospices under NG163, they weren't to investigate. It doesn't matter if you think it's a good thing to put someone out of their misery or to do a mercy killing. It doesn't matter what you think. It's illegal and unlawful, and it's murder.
Jacqui, thank you for having me to your home today. It's a pleasure to get the opportunity to talk to you. I've been following your career for the last couple of years, and I know you've got a new book out, and we'll get down to that in a bit. But I want to start with how it all started for you. What got you into journalism, and how did that progress on to where you are now?
Growing up, although I used to love writing stories and stuff, I actually wanted to be a fashion designer. Well, I wanted to be a nun at one point. Why are you laughing? Then I wanted to be a nurse. I went through all these phases, but I settled by the age of 10 on fashion designer. So that was went the art college route, went to do a fashion degree, was at college for 3 weeks, hated it, then left and thought I need to get a job. Then I worked in some shops, and I worked in fashion for a bit. I really didn't like it, didn't like the people mainly that I met in the short time that I did it. And then I was just doing random jobs, like anything really. I worked in a record company. I worked in just doing like receptionist jobs, admin jobs, that kind of thing. And one day while I was working at this animation company, we used to get Campaign magazine every week, and I opened it, and there was a free copy of a new teenage magazine, a girls' magazine called Just 17. And I thought, oh, I love teenage magazines. So I was about 23 at that point. And I'm flicking through it, thought, oh, I'd love to work on a magazine that was brand new, and this was like a sample edition of it.
Yeah.
And then in The Guardian, I saw an ad the following week, health and beauty editor required for Just 17 magazine. I thought, I can do that. I'm like that Catherine Tate character. I can do that. I thought, what's a health and beauty editor? I don't know, I'll work it out.
Figure it out along the way.
So I went and was interviewed. And this is how I was as a person, and I'm still a little bit like that. I can do that. But so I got an interview at the magazine, and the publisher was interviewing me, and she was asking me all these questions such as, have you done this sort of work before? I'm like, oh yeah, lots of health and beauty editing work. She said, have you done like photographic shoots? I'm like, yeah, a few. She's like, which photographers have you worked with? I'm like, oh, I don't know, loads of them, pretty much all, to be honest. All the main teen fashion photographers, beauty photographers. And she was like, studio work or, and I'm like, oh, both, everything. So I was just completely blagging it. And I thought I'll completely map that up. And she said, oh, we'd like you to write a few beauty features, just samples, and if we like them, we'll publish them and pay you, obviously. But as part of the interview, God, those were the days, can you imagine? And So I did that, and they published them all, which I thought this is over a period of the next few weeks. And then she eventually got back to me and said, "Oh, you're in the final 3." And I'm like, "Oh no, oh no, how did that happen?" And then I was in the final 2.
Yeah.
And I was like, "What am I going to do if I get the job? I haven't got a clue what this job is about or how to do it. I've never done anything like it before." And then she finally called me and said that the other girl had got the job. And I was like, "Oh, thank God." I thought that was a near miss. I'll never do that again. But she said, "Well, we really like your writing. So do you want to come in to the office a couple of days a week, maybe 3 days a week? You can come in and we'll pay you a day rate." And I was like, "Well, I've already actually got a job." And she said, "What are you getting paid?" So this is, remember, back in the Victorian times. She said, I said, "I'm getting £73 a week, so it's a pretty good wage." She went, "Well, we pay £50 a day." Okay, I'm in. So my pay doubled,
a day.
and I was only doing 3 days. But I went in, and they wanted me 5 days a week. So my wages went up from £73 a week to £200 a week. So I was like loaded at that point. I started to save up money. I saved up 20 grand in the bank account in a couple of years, which was like, can you imagine doing that now? Just because I wasn't used to earning that much money, and that was a lot. This was 1985, so I had such good fun working on that magazine, and I'm still friends with some of the people who worked there at that time, and no one's changed. It's quite weird, really.
I'm sure you met some amazing people.
We did. I met Right Said Fred.
Yeah.
I think that I met them in person. I might have done, because bands were always coming up to the office because there's no internet. You know, everything was in person, not online. So it was brilliant. So all the models and all the pop stars would come off. If they got a new record out, they'd come to the office. You know, we had smash hits downstairs. We were on the second floor. They were on the first floor. Yeah, and it was just fun. There was smoking and drinking and people
good old days.
Drugs and you'd walk in, it'd just be a fog of smoke, you know, and wait in. And because I didn't really smoke, you know, I was would have one at a party or something. But I remember at one point I thought, I might as well smoke as well, because everyone else is. So I remember getting an ashtray and getting a cigarette and trying to type, but the smoke's going around. I'm like, I wasn't very good at it anyway, so I couldn't do that anymore. But yeah, and we'd always get into work early. We'd go out after work most nights to the pub and then to a club, get home about 4 a.m, then get up again and go to work the next day, because you can do that in your 20s. We were all going out with pop stars and models and everyone on the magazine, DJs, you know.
I think those days are gone now, aren't they?
Well, do you know what? I didn't then work in an office for a long, long time. And I think the next time was early 2000s. I then worked in an office briefly on a women's magazine, and it was so quiet. I got told off for talking, right, in the office. So I would have been in around 40 or something. And I can't believe I was mortified. This one said, "Can you just like keep the talking down a bit?" And I'm like, "Okay, sorry." And they wouldn't talk to each other. They'd email each other. They'd be sitting this far away across the desk, and I'm like, "Oh, I've just got an email from you." She's like, "Yeah, I know, I just sent it." I'm like, "Can't you just
talk to me?"
It was anyway. Then the next time I was in an office was 2019. I went to go and work on a magazine while someone was doing on pregnancy leave, I think, or something like that. Maternity leave, that's what it's called. And so I went in to work for 4 months in this magazine office. And again, so quiet. Everything, all you hear is the clack, 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 clack of the computer keyboards. And sometimes a cough or a sneeze, and people on the phone, but they're kind of talking like this quite quietly. And it's like, so weird. Anyway, this was Bauer Publishing. And I knew that down the hallway was NME. I think it was NME, but one of the music big. Thought it's going to be so rock and roll in there. I'm gonna go hang out in there for a bit. Just gonna go and see what's going on. Walk down the corridor, and it's NME on the door. I peep in, and there's all these guys sitting there, they look like estate agents, with their headsets on and their clackety clack on the keyboard, and I'm like, where's the music? Can you imagine back in the I know what it was like back in the day.
Yeah.
You know, sex and drugs and rock and roll all day long.
All gone now. None of the above.
It's so sad, and
It
it's
is
like
very sad.
Everything is so sort of homogenized, if that's the right word, and kind of safe and sensible. And I feel sorry for kids growing up in this new world.
It is sad, actually. I feel like it's almost like the sort of colour's gone out of the world a little bit. And as you said, everything's gone a bit safe. Everything's gone a bit sanitary. Everybody's trying to protect children from that, protect people from this, prevent
it's all
this
for your
from
own
happening.
safety.
Yeah, and it creates a situation for me, and I've said this before, where it feels like they're trying to stop the ability for anybody to do wrong.
Yeah.
And that sort of is a way of sort of castrating the human race.
Yeah.
You know, the goodness in us comes from the fact that we know we can do wrong, but we choose not to. We choose not to do it every single day.
Sometimes we choose to be naughty.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes it's nice.
Yeah.
But
now you're not allowed.
yeah, now you're not allowed. And that's just getting worse
Yeah.
at the moment. And I think the sort of the light is going out in the world in that way, in a sense. I think it's very sad. So you did Just 17. You've done lots of different publications, and then obviously now you're in this situation where you're pretty much focusing on COVID. What led you from pursuing that line of career to deep diving into this, and really getting to the bottom of what happened during the COVID pandemic?
Well, the thing I liked most about journalism was the fun of it. And I thought, my main aim, actually, when I was quite young, was to have a lot of fun, and also, ideally, to earn money through not doing too much. So I thought maybe I could write a song that is a huge hit, or maybe I could write a book that is a bestseller. Passive income, I think it's called, isn't it?
Yeah.
I didn't know it was called that at the time. I just thought, I want to do something like that, so then I'm free to do stuff that I want, And I decided quite early on that the best sort of work to do is work that comes from your own head, right? That you don't have to interview people, you don't have to go anywhere. You can just. So I thought fiction. So I started writing short stories. I've written hundreds of short stories, mainly for teenagers at that point. Sold them all over the world, and resold them as well. Used to be able to syndicate in those days. Now you do something, it goes online, everyone nicks it.
Yeah.
And that's the end of it. There's no syndication anymore. I've also had, in recent years, magazines and newspapers put other journalists' names on my work.
Oh, really?
Or even their own names. There was one features editor at The Sun. I did an article for them. This would have been maybe 10 years ago. And I interviewed the person. It was a big story. When it was published in the newspaper, so not online, the features editor put her name on it. So I called her and said, "Why have you put your name on my story? You didn't interview that person, I did." Because it's in the first person, saying, I'm here with this person, talking to them about this and that. And she said, "Oh, I put your name down in the corner there, additional material." But I said, "No, but the whole article is mine." And she said, "Yeah, but I edited it." I said, "That's your job, you're the editor, but it's still my story." Anyway, she had 3 or 4 more stories of mine about to be published. I called the publisher and told him what happened. He said he'd have a word with her. Then she messaged me and said, "I won't be using your other stories." And never heard from her again, never got commissioned ever again.
Wow. From
her. So, and this is what happens if you don't let them abuse you, they'll just not use you anymore. I just thought, don't care. But it's still happening. I did a piece the Christmas before last because, like as you know, in the last few years, I've been investigating involuntary euthanasia in care homes and hospitals and hospices, and occasionally in people's homes in the UK, which was rife at the start of the pandemic. And I had lots of people coming to me telling their stories. And of course, none of the papers wanted that story.
Of course.
At all. So, yeah, so I'm just going back to that story in the Mail Online. I was trying to get the stories out there and have been since early 21, having meetings with editors who admit, yes, this is a huge story, should be headline news, and then they go back to the office and I don't hear from them again, even though I chase. And I'm still pushing that story. I've been pushing it for 5 years now. So just a couple of weeks ago, I sent out a few emails to a few editors just saying, "Are you ready to run that story yet? It's been 5 years now since I've been silenced now. It's just complete silence. They don't even bother replying. But if I send them another pitch, they'll reply to that.
Yeah.
But this one, they won't reply to anymore. So, with this, so I decided how about if I angle the stories differently? So there was one woman called Jilly whose parents won the postcode lottery, but they both died before they had a chance to spend any of it. So I thought they'll like that story. The dad was horribly abused, neglected, and ultimately killed in his care home, right? I'll just slip that in as an aside, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully people will pick up on it. So I kind of did the whole lottery story, then mentioned how, meanwhile, Brian, that was the name of her dad, was abused and eventually he died in the care home. And it was brilliant, actually, because when it was published, and I looked at the comments, and nearly everyone was going, "But what happened to the guy in the care home?" So people did pick up on it.
Yeah.
What happened? What do you mean he was abused and died? What happened? Anyway, they took the story down after a day. They said a family member had phoned in and complained about it. I'm like, that doesn't matter.
Bull.
Yeah. Anyway, they took it down. And I think it's probably partially because of the comment, people asking what happened to the guy,
Drawing too much attention.
Yeah, even though I just kind of slipped it in. I thought maybe that's the way to do it, but they're on to me now. They're looking out for it. But it's like they will not publish that story.
So what was it that made you want to focus on this, or what made you realise that something was wrong and something was up with the vaccines and with the way that they were dealing with people in care homes and hospitals? What made you move over to that?
Well, I've always been awake to what's going on in the world. My dad was a very questioning kind of person. Always told me not to believe everything I saw on the telly and to question everything. And, I've known since I was 7 that no one went to the moon, So my dad told me that. He said, no one's gone to the moon, don't you believe it? Because I came home from school. I remember it being shown on a very high up black and white TV in the hall. We all had to gather in the assembly hall and watch it. And I was like, wow, look, men went to the moon. Thinking, sounds a bit mad, and I told my dad, and he was like, "No, don't worry about it. Don't bother your pretty little head with that." But so in 2019, I watched Event 201. That desktop, John Hopkins desktop exercise, where they were basically spelling out what they were going to do. That there was going to be a pandemic, it was going to come from some animal, probably in China, and it was going to spread around the world. And I just thought, this is hilarious, no one's going to fall for that. I wonder when they're going to put that into action. Anyway, it was 4 months later, I think, that they started, and I was like, this is that thing that I saw, didn't think they were going to do it immediately. Here we go. So I knew it was going to happen, obviously, because they told us what was going to happen. And I thought, this is just mad. And none of it was making sense to me. People were believing it, and the people falling not flat on their faces, falling like this in Wuhan. And I was just laughing, thinking, oh my God, are people going to fall for this, really? So I was incredibly cynical. I didn't believe any of it from the start. And then all these stupid rules and restrictions were coming in. I thought, I'm not following any of those. I've got this bracelet, it says, I do not comply. But my daughter bought me that in 2020 at Christmas, and I haven't taken it off. But I just thought, I'm not going along with any of this. It's all nonsense. It's not law, So it was great. First thing I did when there was a lockdown, I had a car back then. I got in my car, I was driving all over the place. I could get from one side of London to the other. I used to live in Chiswick then, West London. My dad was over in Dagenham. I could get there in half an hour. Whizzing past Trafalgar Square, no one around. It was like, this is brilliant. I drove up to Norwich to see my friend, not a single car on the motorway. And people are going, are you mad? What are you doing? And were there police barricades? I was like, I didn't see any.
Barricades.
I didn't see any police at all. I didn't see anyone. There was no one. It was like some apocalyptic movie, I was waiting for the zombies to come out, but didn't even see a zombie. But and all those flashing signs going, stay at home. And I'm like, what the hell? And I was just like driving around thinking, this is so weird. Where is it? Why is everyone going along with it? And of course there wasn't a killer virus. I didn't, and the mask wearing was pretty stressful because I just couldn't. I used to say, maybe I've got an inflated sense of self-esteem or something, but I cannot put a muzzle on my face. I'm sorry, that's slave behaviour.
Yeah.
Also, it would feel uncomfortable. I wouldn't be able to breathe properly. It would make me panicky. And I'm looking at all these people like covering their faces, and I was like, why are they doing it?
And they still do now.
Yeah. I saw someone yesterday in London with only one person, thank God, but I just look at them thinking, what's going on in your head there, And my dad was in a care home. My dad had a stroke in October 2019, and it was quite severe. So he'd had a stroke before in 2014 as well. So I knew he'd recover, but this was quite severe. He was having trouble with mobility. So they recommended that he went into a care home to be just for a bit of respite. And he did need 24-hour care at that point. He was only young, he was 76. Yeah. So he was in a care home at that point, which was awful. So the first care home he was in was terrible. But the manager there, I said, he's probably, not going to be here long. I'll pick him up probably in a few months or something. She was like, oh, no, he's not going to be going home. I said, what do you mean? She said, no. Then my dad was laughing and joking and saying, he said, yeah, you walk in and you go out the back in a box. And she went, it's pretty much like that. And I'm like, well, that's not going to happen to my dad because he's going to recover and I'm going to take him home. So he had a council house in Dagenham. Literally a week after they'd heard he was in a care home, they were around because I was staying in the house sometimes to be close to him. We need the house back. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's just gone into a care home for a few months. He'll be back. And they went, no, we need the house back. He won't be coming back. And I'm like, yeah, he will. Anyway, he was in the care home when all the lockdowns started happening and the window visits. And even though this second care home was a very nice care home, my dad had made friends with the staff. He wasn't keen on the other residents, but he liked the staff. He used to say that the residents were all old and mad.
It does come hand in hand with the care home.
I know, and there was a crazy lady who used to come into his room and scream abuse at him for stealing her clothes, which he obviously never did. Anyway, so that used to stress him out. But so it was a nice care home, but they locked down. And I remember the day of lockdown, I'd gone round to take my dad out for a Sunday lunch and got to the door and tried to pull it. And it's like, oh, the door's locked, that's weird. So I'm thinking I've got it in my head that it was February, mid-February or something, but maybe it was March. And the care home manager came to the door and she was like, no, you can't come in. I was like, why, what's the problem? And she was like, we're in lockdown. And I'm like, what's lockdown? What, are we in a sci-fi movie now? What is going on? And there was this little old man waiting as well at the door because he used to go and see his wife every day and have lunch with her every single day. She'd been in there for 8 years, he was telling me. And he was like, I need to get in to have lunch with my wife. And they were like, no, go away, you can't come in. And he started crying. He was probably in his 80s. And he was like, I need to see her. She's going to be really worried if I'm not there, because she had dementia. And then he was going to me, I've paid for my lunch. He said, I pay for that. I have lunch with her every day. And they won't let me in to have my lunch. I haven't got anything at home. And he was really upset. And I just thought, what are they doing? This is just awful. Anyway, time went on. Window visits became a thing. So, but when my dad was first in there, so we got to about May 2020. And I had a call from the care home. And they said, we're just going through your dad's paperwork just to make sure we've got all the right information, that everything's in place. And so she's reading through all the stuff for me to say, yeah, that's fine, or that's not fine. And then she went, and he's got a DNR in place. And I went, sorry, what? What's a DNR? Because I'd kind of heard of it, but didn't really know what it was. She had a Do Not Resuscitate order. I went, oh, what? They put those on like terminally ill people in the hospices, And she said, yeah. I said, oh, no, he doesn't need one of those. And she said, oh, no, everyone here has got one. And I was like, why? And she said, oh, I don't know, it's just a rule. Everyone who comes in, we put a DNR on them. I said, so does that mean if his heart stops for whatever reason or he stops breathing, you'll just leave him to die? And she was like, yeah, but of course, resuscitating elderly people is a terrible thing. And then they spin you this yarn, it can break their ribs, they're very frail. I'm like, my dad's only 76, he's not that frail. And if he stops breathing, if he chokes on his breakfast and stops breathing, you're just going to let him die. They were like, well, yeah, that's kind of what it is. And I'm like, no, I don't want that. I need it taken off. They said, well, we can't take it off. So I contacted my dad's GP and I said, I need that removed. She said, well, it's not up to me. Then I found out there was a blanket policy throughout all the care homes that like the woman said, every resident had a DNR put on them.
How are they allowed to do that on behalf of somebody else who's of sound body and mind?
Well, the rule used to be that the person would have to give consent, or their family would give consent, or both. But then suddenly I was being told, no, the consultant can override all the family and the patients and the residents' wishes. So that was some kind of new thing that had come in. And this was happening all over it, I discovered later when I spoke to other people. So they refused to remove it. So I thought, I need to keep a close eye on him. But of course, I couldn't go in. My dad was getting more and more depressed, going, why are you standing at the window in the rain? Come in. And I'm like, I can't. They've locked all the doors. So we had the window open, obviously, chatting. One day, and I'm
That
like
makes
holding his
sense, doesn't
hand
it?
through the window, and he's standing here and I'm here, you know. One day, one of the carers came into his room while I was visiting, and she said, well, you can't have the window open. And I was like, sorry, how am I going to talk to him if the window's shut? And I said, what are you worried about? Are you worried about the COVIDs in the care home coming out and attacking me? Or are you worried about the COVIDs from the outside going in? What is it? So it's just the rules. We have to have the windows shut. I said, how can I talk to my dad through a shut window? It's like a prison visit. She said, use phones. I said, you've lost his phone. He lost 3 phones. That's another thing I want to write about. Nearly everyone I've spoken to, when their loved ones have gone into care homes, they lose their phones, instant jewellery, their teeth, their hearing aids, their glasses. So these poor people, often very elderly, are totally vulnerable. You know, they don't know what's going on. They can't find any of their stuff. Clothes go missing as well.
So do you think that happens not for the fact that, you know, especially like with things like phones, you could say, well, somebody's stealing them for gain, for profit. But with the other things that you're talking about, that doesn't seem like that would be for profit. So do you think it's a way of creating delusions and delirium? And
I think it's to make them feel completely vulnerable and at the mercy of their carers. Because they're lost, you know, a lot of them. But my dad was actually getting depressed, mentally depressed. He was saying, what's the point of being alive, living like this? Why am I in prison? Why have they imprisoned me? Well, I haven't done anything. I said, Dad, I'll get you out. Seriously, this is ridiculous. You know, they can't do this to people. So I phoned the owner of the care home and said, I'm coming to get my dad tomorrow. I want him outside with his stuff at 3:00 in his wheelchair, because he'd become quite weak, you know, not getting any exercise at all. And I'm going to take him home. And they said, well, you can't do that. It's lockdown. I said, if you don't have him ready tomorrow at 3:00, I'm going to take you to court for false imprisonment. I was just making it up, so I went along, and violation of his human rights and my human rights. So have him ready at 3. So I drove up there the next day at 3, thinking they won't have brought him out and they're going to be furious. He's outside in his wheelchair with about 3 or 4 carers with him saying, oh, bye, John, have a nice time, you know. And my dad did have slight vascular dementia, which I think I later discovered was due to the medication he was on. Because when we gradually weaned him off the medication, he was fine. Anyway, he got into the car and he's like, where are we going? Going to the seaside? I won't go to the seaside if you want. I said, we're going to go back to your house first. And he's like, oh, okay. So I got him back home. And after a day or so, he's like, should I go back to the care home? And I was like, why do you want to go back? And he said, but what about the others? He had survivor's guilt. He was going, what about the others? Are we going to get them out as well? And I was like, I don't know if I can do that, Dad. But
it's not the Great Escape.
Yeah. It's funny, actually, there was a man in there who did come to the window once while I was chatting to my dad. Tom, his name was. And he came to the window and went, right, we're going to meet in the town square tonight at midnight and we'll organise the escape. And I was like, okay, I'll see you there. But he was obviously feeling like he was in prison, this guy. You know, he had dementia or Alzheimer's or whatever, but they were all suffering. And my dad was just saying, but they're going to miss me. He said, the staff. And I said, well, I've still got Ben's number, so we can phone him and text him whenever you want, and maybe he'll come and visit you as well. And he's like, oh, okay, so he kind of calmed down. Then he was really happy to be at home. But then the depression never really left, because he was because he was at this point, so he was about 76 at this point, 77 maybe. He's thinking, right, what do I do with the rest of my life now that I'm home? And I'm like, I don't know, what do you want to do? He's like, should I get a job? And I'm like, if you want, what job would you like to do? And I don't know, really. I said, you are retired. You've been retired for quite a long time now, but if you want to get a job, what do you fancy doing? And he's like, I don't know, I don't fancy doing anything really. And I remember putting on Facebook at the time, can anyone suggest some things for my dad to do? He's really bored at home, because he's like, well, let's just sit here in this armchair and look out the window for the next 20 years. And I'm like, no, you can do whatever you like. I made a list of 200 things that he could do, and he didn't want to do any of them. The only thing he vaguely liked, I said, we could get a fish tank and you could look at it, and he's like, But everything else is like, well, I don't want to do that. I don't like gardening. I can't paint. I can't draw. I don't want to read. It's tiring. Don't want to watch the telly. Didn't want to do anything. So he was depressed, basically.
Yeah, really depressed.
Yeah, because of what he'd been through. And maybe the stroke had affected his brain. But I could see he was depressed. And it got to a point, I couldn't look after him either, because he's a big man, you know. And I'd never bathed my dad before or got him in the shower, and I was having to do all that. And he was mortified, obviously. And I'm like, well, you know, you still need a bit of help. It's like, I'm not looking, Dad, I've got the towel like this, you know. And we'd kind of have a laugh and a joke. He wasn't sleeping properly, so when I was staying there, he would come into my room like 10 times a night saying, is it morning yet, you know? Why are you still in bed? It's 3 PM. I'm like, Dad, it's 3 AM, you know? Or I'd just find him sitting on the end of my bed. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, fancy to chat. And I'm like, okay. So it was exhausting, you know. So I decided to get him like 24-hour carers while he was needing that kind of help. So, and he was quite happy with that. But yeah, so that's why I was interested in what was going on in care homes. Now, I pitched a story to the Telegraph about these DNRs being in place and this blanket DNR policy. And one of the features editors there commissioned the article. So I did that, sent it to him, and then it was quiet for a couple of weeks. And I said, oh, when's that article being published? He said, oh, we're not using it. And I was like, oh, was there something wrong with it? And he said, no, it's just, we're not using it. Someone above him said no, basically. He couldn't really give a reason. So get about 20 of those a day at the moment going by. You know what that's about. So they didn't publish the article. So I thought, well, this is an important article. And in that article, I interviewed a whistleblower doctor who told me that DNRs were being put on so many people, not just residents in care homes, but anyone going into hospital over a certain age. She said 50 usually. Over 50 was counted as elderly. People with mental health issues, like she said a young schizophrenic woman had come in, DNR. Autistic children going into hospital, DNR. Anyone they deemed was not worthy of resuscitation. Now, this is eugenics, you know.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. And, shocking. But they didn't want to publish this. None of the papers wanted to publish anything about that at all. I mean, the Telegraph did publish a story about it a couple of years later, but this was 2020. So I thought I'd write some stories about the care home lockdowns and getting my dad out. So the Telegraph, it's still online, published a story called something like Why I Got My Dad Out of the Care Home. Can't remember what it was called now. Yeah, they used a funny word. Can't remember. Busted my dad out of the care home? It was something like that. Anyway, can't remember. It was a weird word. And then I did an article on how difficult it was to look after him and how I wasn't managing very well, didn't know what to do. Then I worked on a more general article just about the lockdowns and how the residents were being affected. And so they like those sort of articles. Mm. But when I started pitching stories like, we're 6 months into this so-called pandemic, and we're not seeing any huge rise in numbers of deaths and stuff like that. I've been checking the ONS figures, the official, Office of National Statistics figures on a daily basis. I was fascinated by it. And it was all weird. I discovered that there were no flu deaths being recorded. It's like, hello. And then I contacted David Icke. This must have been around April, May 2020, because I used to work with him back in 2013 when he set up the People's Voice. And I just thought he'll be interested in all this. Sent it to him, and he was looking into it anyway. He knew, you know.
Of course.
Of course. He knows everything. And then we started liaising over stuff. in December 2020, he interviewed me for his podcast about what was going on in the care homes and was there a cull going on, because by that point people had realised there had been a peak of deaths, but only in care homes in April 2020.
Yeah.
What the hell's going on? I think I know what's going on. These people obviously weren't dying of a killer virus, because there wasn't a killer virus. Some people think there is. I don't think that at all. I think it was like very cleverly rebranded colds and flu and pneumonias. And like I said, there were no flu deaths. There were 311, I think, flu deaths in 2020, because they'd shifted, and the numbers match up completely. The usual number of flu deaths then became COVID deaths. Yeah. So it was all pretty obvious to me what was going on. So David interviewed me, and after that, I got quite a lot of people contacting me saying there's some weird stuff going on in the care homes and the hospitals. You know, my mum went into hospital. She's 57, and she was only in there a couple of days, and now she's dead, and she didn't have a terminal illness. You know, what's going on? I'm just looking at the cover of the book that I've written here, because these are actually the real people, the victims basically, who died, of the people who've told the stories in the book. So the stories that I was hearing were just horrendous, just awful. This lady here, she had a dizzy spell at home, and her daughter said, "Oh, maybe you should go and get checked at A&E." 29 hours later, she was dead. They were like, there was nothing. She'd been line dancing the night before. She was cooking in her kitchen, had a bit of a dizzy spell, went to hospital, and they killed her, basically. And I was hearing hundreds of stories like this coming in, and thinking, what the hell's going on? And I thought, so glad I got my dad out of the care home. But obviously it wasn't happening in every care home, but it seemed to be happening quite a lot. And more so in hospitals, people going in with minor ailments and never coming out. At that point, we discovered that a new NICE guideline, NICE, a guideline had been put into place on April the 3rd, 2020, and it was called NG163, which was a COVID protocol, apparently. And when you read this protocol, the treatment for COVID, so if anyone goes in, they put them on this pathway, NG163, which involved the withdrawal of food, the withdrawal of fluids, the withdrawal of any essential medications, and the administration of Midazolam and morphine. Midazolam is a benzodiazepine, it's a sedative, and morphine is a painkiller. When you use those two things together, it depresses respiration. If you use them together consistently over a period of time via a syringe driver, which is a pump on the arm, it will lead to total depression of respiration, which is death. So it's like, why are they putting people with respiratory problems on a protocol which stops them breathing or restricts their breathing or slows down their breathing? That doesn't make any sense. It says in the British National Formulary you must never use a benzodiazepine and an opioid together, which is what they were prescribing in this protocol, because it will kill people.
So why would these? Why? I understand that, and I believe it to be true. What I always struggle with is, how do they get mass compliance of so many doctors and nurses to comply with something? I mean, you could argue that a nurse is following orders, and they, but a doctor,
they're all following orders. A lot of them do.
That understands the medication, that knew exactly what they were doing. I struggle with how they managed to get everybody to do that.
Well, our lovely health secretary at the time, Matt Hancock, he approved of this new protocol, NG163, but he put it before a panel of two professors, including Professor Sam Ahmadzi, who's one of the world's leading palliative care specialists. He was the main author of the piece that they wrote for the BMJ on this, and another professor and 9 doctors. So Hancock put it to them and said, what do you think of this? Good, isn't it? And they were like, no, that is not good. That's terrible. It's going to kill people, that protocol. He was like, lovely, and I'll use it. So he ignored them. But that article, authored by Sam Ahmadzi and the other doctors and professor, they that's in the BMJ. You can still see that. You can look that up. Saying this protocol should not be used. It's dangerous. And he wants to implement it. And we've said no. But he's doing it anyway. So I don't know how he got away with that. Well, we do know because it was all part of the plan to cull and depopulate and get rid of a huge number of the useless eaters, mainly the elderly, the disabled, the terminally ill, the mentally ill. Like I said, it's eugenics in full swing there. And Matt Hancock was loving it. He actually said at the COVID inquiry, didn't he, a couple of years after that, he wanted to be the person who decided who should live and who should die. He actually said that. When that came out of his mouth, it's like, he is a psychopath because psychopaths think they can say things like that and get away with it.
Yeah,
so far he has. Psychopaths think other people are too stupid. They won't notice if I say this crazy thing.
I think the quiet bit is said out loud quite a lot now. And it's almost like they can't lie, you know, and it's just spelled out right in front of you. It happens all the time. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you are politically. I think everybody's exactly the same. They say the quiet bit out loud at the moment. And I think people are now completely desensitized to it, that even when they hear it, they defend it.
Yeah.
You hear it a lot.
And I know this sounds a little bit woo-woo, but that's how black magic operates. Everything has to be in plain sight.
Well, this was the area that I was going into, and it was something, I can't remember who I was speaking to the other day. I think it was when I was speaking to Andrew, actually, and it's like, they can't lie to you, Digby. They have to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
So this is the way that this works. And so many people are just blind to it. I've got friends, and I say this over and over again, and you give them irrefutable evidence. And it can be on this, or it can be on anything else. You go, yeah, but you haven't got any proof. You go, here's the proof. Yeah, but what? Yeah, but no, but that can't be right.
Yeah,
but it is. Yeah, but it isn't. It's like programming completely. And they can't overcome it. And I think it's really scary.
What I found alarming as well, I mean, a lot of the editors I deal with are probably in their 30s and 40s, you know, I call them young people. But
thanks.
they're this whole euthanasia, involuntary euthanasia thing, it seems quite normal to them. So in 2020, when I approached one young editor and told her exactly what was happening, I said, people are being killed in hospitals and care homes. And she said, well, it's not much of a story really, is it? And I said, it's a huge story. Listen to me, people are being killed in hospitals and care homes. And she said, well, we all kind of know that, you know, the elderly and the terminally ill get a bit of a helping hand at the end. We all know that. It's just not really spoken about. I said, well, it needs to be spoken about because it's illegal. It's murder. If you help someone kill themselves, or if you kill them using a drug overdose or using anything, that's murder. If you get found guilty of involuntarily euthanizing someone or them being euthanized against their will, you get the same prison sentence as you would for premeditated murder. You get a minimum of 14 years, maximum of life. But she was, I just don't think it's much of a story really, because it happens all the time. I said, I hear what you're saying, that the terminally ill and the very, very ancient might, you know, get too many sedatives or painkillers and then they die because of that. Yeah, but the people I'm talking about, they're not old and they're not terminally ill.
Yeah, this is where we have to draw the line as well.
Yeah.
I was speaking to somebody else the other day about, because I said that I was coming to chat with you, and they were like, yeah, but if you're really old and you are dying and you are in a lot of pain and you're going, I just want it to end, you know, then yeah, I get that. I can understand that.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about the same thing here.
Yeah.
We're talking about people that just needed to be gotten rid of. They weren't terminally ill. They were given these drugs, Midazolam, morphine, to be disposed of. And that's a completely different situation.
Well, like you're saying, it doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't matter if you think it's morally right that someone should have end-of-life drugs if they want them. It doesn't matter if you think it's a good thing to put someone out of their misery or to do a mercy killing. it doesn't matter what you think. It's illegal and unlawful, and it's murder.
Which is why they're now trying to pass it.
Well, this is what I've been watching now, watching it unfold. They're frantically pushing the assisted dying bill, not actually doing very well at the moment. And you can just see these people, the people who are really pushing it, Kim Ledbetter, and they're just like, they're not right, those people. Esther Ranson has obviously been employed to push it as well.
I didn't know she was still around.
Yeah.
They drag her out for these special occasions.
Yeah, she's had stage 4 lung cancer for about 4 years now or something, a long, long time. Most people who have stage 4 lung cancer are dead within weeks, you know.
Yeah.
But she started parpling on about, you know, how she would love to be euthanized if she ever got terminally ill. And it's like, hello, you are terminally ill, apparently. And she's just saying it's a great idea and like pushing it all the time. And it's like, God, how much are they paying her? And she's still going. She's been doing that for a few years now, but she's still going strong. I don't know if she's even got cancer. Apparently she has, but who knows? They could be using that to push the agenda. I don't really know, but maybe she has. And the other thing I was going to say is NG163, when you look at it, it's identical to the Liverpool care pathway, which was a death pathway, or a care pathway as they used to call it, that was abolished in 2014 because it was deemed too barbaric and inhumane to use. And it involved the withdrawal of food and water, the withdrawal of essential medications, and the administration of end-of-life drugs, benzodiazepine and an opioid, and it was killing people. And there was huge uproar about that in 2013, 2014, it was finally abolished. And now they've surreptitiously, it never actually went away, they still carried on doing it, just calling it different names and different numbers. But it was brought back in big time with NG163, ramped it right up. People, you know, like I said, going into hospital for minor issues were dead within hours or days, you know. And I was starting to get all these stories, and none of the papers were interested. I actually organised 2 face-to-face meetings, one with the news editor of the Daily Mail and one with the medical editor of the Mail on Sunday. I brought one person along with me who had all the proof that his father had been killed. And at first they were like, no. So these were 2 separate meetings. But by the end of the meetings, they were like, this is massive. This is massive. Mm-hmm. Is this really going on? You know, I said, yeah. And at that point, I had about 20 people who were willing to be interviewed by the newspapers, willing to be photographed, willing to show the evidence that they had. Because of course, anyone going to the police weren't interested.
Yeah.
And I've just written an article about that now, because of course we realise now, Operation Talla, that's why from March 2020 that came in, and it was supposed to stop in 2022. Don't know if it did.
Can you just explain what that is for the people that haven't seen what that is? That
was a police operation brought in, and it was in 2 sections. The police were told if anyone comes to them reporting COVID injuries or COVID deaths, to not investigate, and if anyone comes to them reporting murders in hospitals and care homes and hospices under NG163, they weren't to investigate. But we didn't know that was going on. I suspected it because I was wondering as well, did the media, were they under that as well? You know, were they operating under that because they weren't willing to investigate anything? And I spoke to a couple of mainstream journalists as well. Isabel Oakeshott was one, because she had heard this story and she put out a quote saying that all these people wanging on about their loved ones being murdered in hospitals and care homes were a bunch of crazies, basically. And I thought, that's not nice, because I knew a lot of people who were in terrible states because of what happened to their family members. And so I contacted her very politely and just said, it is true what's going on, and that's not a nice thing for you to say, really. It's a bit mean. And also, at that point, I'd made a film. I'd made a film called A Good Death with Iconic Media, and that was about euthanasia, involuntary euthanasia. Lots of interviews, lots of facts. And that film still stands. I think it's one of Iconic's most viewed documentaries, but everything in it still stands to this day. And we made that in 2021. So I said to Isabel Oakeshott, who was a Telegraph journalist, would you kindly have a look at my film and then get back to me, see what you think? I think it might change your mind. Because anyone I showed that film to who was a little bit dubious, they would say, oh, yeah, it's like a light would turn on. I think that happened to my mum. Or that happened to my sister last week. And people were waking up. So I said to her, would she look at it? And she said she would. And it was a very polite written exchange on X Messenger. And the next time I went to look to ask her had she had a chance to look at the film, she'd blocked me. Another Telegraph journalist, Alison Pearson, blocked me. I used to email her a lot through 2020 and 2021 saying, here's a good story, what do you think of this? And she would reply a couple of times. Then suddenly, out of the blue, blocked. Piers Morgan blocked me. It was like, never spoken to a man in my life.
No loss there.
No. But there was a lot of that going on.
Yeah.
What were they? Were they just blocking everyone? Because I mean, I didn't know the man. But and I did ask for help from other more well-known journalists, but some did what they could, but others weren't interested. So that's why I did the film.
It's almost like somebody put a do not resuscitate on your career
Yes.
at that point.
It's absolutely true. I did feel blacklisted.
Yeah.
But I could pitch I could pitch an idea like this to a newspaper, and they'd say no thanks, or they'd just ignore it. And then I'd pitch an idea about something completely different, like the care home stories, or I think the last piece I did for the Mail Online, a friend of mine was asked if she could have her bag searched in Aldi or Lidl or somewhere, and she was up in arms and there was a big row and she filmed it and they loved that. So, they loved that story. But I'm like, hey, how about the euthanasia story? And they're like, no.
No.
It's like, how about a cat stuck up a tree? Oh, we'll have that.
That's great.
Yeah.
With a fireman involved, brilliant.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
How about a story about how millions of deaths were misattributed to COVID? Oh no, we don't know. But I must say, the Telegraph did get back to me about 2023 or 2024 and said, remember that story you had about deaths being misattributed to COVID? And I was like, sure, I'm quite interested in that now. It's like,
well, do you think they are coming around to it a bit more now? I mean, maybe not to the level of that you would find acceptable, but I think there is definitely a feeling now that people that were dead set that the virus was a real thing, and people still have varied opinions on that, even within sort of our community of people or group of friends would say, some will say that it didn't exist in the first place, some say that it did and that it was planned and it was, so let's just table that for a second. But do you think that there is now a lot more people that were against questioning it in the first place that are now realising, hang on a second, something's not fucking right here.
Yeah.
Something went on and people's heads need to start rolling.
Yeah, lots, yeah. There's been a big turnaround. People I told this story to 5 years ago were just like, oh my God, she's off her rocker. What's she talking about now? Now, if I mention it, they're like, oh yeah, I've heard about that. Yeah, isn't that awful?
Yeah, me 5 years ago.
Yeah, so it's... people are definitely waking up, And I've talked to a lot of, I call it men in the street, people in pubs, people at the hairdressers, people in shops. I talk to everyone. I like to know what's going on. In fact, in 2020, I went out, I printed my own leaflets and went around. It was about mask wearing to inform all the shops and all the pubs and all the restaurants, the ones that were open. You cannot ask someone why they're not wearing a mask.
Yeah.
So I did this whole thing saying you could actually be prosecuted. And if you're a small business, there's already been a case at that point where someone did prosecute for being asked. And they got awarded £9,000 by the business. I said, if you're a small, you can't afford that. I said, just don't ask. I remember going in, I've got so many mask stories because it was so tedious. Everywhere you went, it's like, oh, can you put a mask on? It's like, no. Oh, why? You can't ask me that. Well, why not? Here's a leaflet that I've written. explains why you can't. I remember in a pub, 2 young guys, I gave them the leaflet and they're both like going, oh, wow, really? I said, look it up on the government website. You're not allowed to ask people. And they were looking, going, oh, wow. And I said, get your manager. So the manager came and said, do you know what? I had no idea about any of this. They just told us everyone has to wear masks. I did not know that we could get into trouble for asking people why they're not. And most people didn't have a clue because they were getting all their information off the TV.
Yeah.
And actually, there was a point, wasn't there? You know, when all the schools were closed, there was a point, I can't remember which MP it was, not Cummings, but someone who looked a bit like him, standing up in the House of Commons basically saying, we didn't tell the schools to shut down. We left it to the discretion of the head teachers. But the head teachers were, again, getting their news from the newspapers and the telly, believing that they had to shut the school down. But the government, they were off the hook because they didn't enforce that. And I thought they're going to do this with the jabs as well. They're going to say, we didn't force anyone to take it. You know, of course it was an experiment, you know.
Well, I mean, for me, when the schools shut, I mean, kids being forced out of school and staying at home, spending more time with their parents and people as a family is never a bad thing. I think the worst thing, actually, that happened in schools was when they reopened.
Well, it depends on the family, doesn't it?
Well, yes, that is true. That is true. But this segregation, this putting kids in bubbles, not allowing them to mix with other children, and now I see what's happening in the education system now, and it seems to like everything's developed from the weird things that they were allowed to do now, and they've just sort of run with it. It's like I've got 2 older kids. I've got 2 younger kids, 2 older kids. I say older, one's 14, one's 12 in the older kids. But they talk about, like, if you misbehave in school, you used to get detention. Now you get isolation. You get isolated.
Which is torture. That's deemed as torture, yeah.
And why is this acceptable? You know?
Well,
and
yeah,
it
like
scares me what they now do in schools. Or like they don't react to bullying. My son came back from school the other day and he'd been pinned down by another kid at school and kicked in the face, and he had a lump on the side of his face. It was massive, like larger than a golf ball. I was like, so what? Who is the child and what is happening about it? Because that's assault.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, well, we might look at the CCTV footage. He's just been assaulted under your care.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do about it? Why is this allowed to happen? My 2 youngest are homeschooled, and I fear for the education system in this country.
Yeah.
I fear what they think it's acceptable to do and what they think it's acceptable to turn a blind eye to. And I think, actually thinking about it, it's just like the amount of things that society as a whole are just willing to turn a blind eye to now.
Yeah, it's changed. I feel really sorry for children who've grown up through this debacle, basically. They've not developed normally or naturally. They haven't lived a normal life. Like I was just saying to you earlier about, even when I was in my 20s, you know, the whole work environment was so different. Things were fun. But these kids have grown up with restrictions and not allowed to do so many things and terrified, you know. A lot of them have got germ phobia now because of it. They're neurotic,
Anxiety.
Terrible anxiety. Young teens suffering from anxiety and depression. All the pressure from social media as well doesn't help. But I think growing up through those years has really affected them and in a bad way. You know, detrimentally. They've really suffered. They're not the kids they should be.
Well, you only have to look at anybody that got a dog or puppy during lockdown and look at those dogs now, and they go, "Oh no, he's all right. He's just got separation anxiety," you know, and that's what you're getting from a dog.
Yeah,
that's what happened to a dog. Yeah, during being bought and raised up in that time. Now imagine what happens to an infant child or any age child or to any of us. There's this thing that I've seen, which is sort of called COVID amnesia. And I think a lot of people have got it.
Oh,
there's 2 years of your life you cannot remember.
Definitely.
Because every day was like the next.
And what you're saying there about, you know, it being good that kids are at home with their family. I think there was some massive increase phone calls to like child charities and, you know, reports of abuse at home, because not all children are in happy families, you know, that they're exposed to abuse and they're trapped in the home with their abusers. They can't even go to school anymore.
Yeah,
there was more domestic violence during that time. All sorts more, probably. I remember trying to look up, were there more suicides during that period? It was really, I couldn't find the information. I think when I first looked around 2021, they said the information wouldn't be available until the following year.
Yeah.
But when I looked again, it still wasn't available. Because they want to cover that up. I think there would have been a huge increase in suicides because of what people were going through at that time. So they've got a lot to answer for. But as we know, it wasn't about them trying to protect us from a killer virus. It's all about restructuring the whole economy. It's all about control, surveillance, digital ID, bringing all that in. It was just a Trojan horse to bring in all the new measures that they want to bring in.
Look at track and trace. I mean, that was a massive step towards digital ID. They managed to create a system where you had an ID essentially on your phone and it could tell who was around you and record all the people around you, how long you were with them, and that's only the technology that we know was available from that app. Imagine everything else that was built into that app. They had to go in and actually change the settings, the software from Apple, didn't they, and Google.
Right.
You had to get a software update because it actually rewrote the operating system of the phone to enable that piece of software to work, to do what it needed to do. So they were pinging out constant Bluetooth signals, whether you requested them or not.
Yeah.
They were bouncing off every other phone, so it could tell how far the phone was from another phone, who that phone belonged to, and how long they were together.
Yeah.
That's how it worked. And then that data went off to a centralized system.
Yeah.
And now we're staring down the barrel of digital ID now. You go, well, they've already got track and trace sorted out, so they'll put that in there. They'll know where everybody is. They're talking about... They do it all the time. They tell you it's for one reason, and the backdoor reason is something completely different.
Yeah.
So what are they talking about in Parliament now? They're talking about banning social media for under 16. So everybody's like, well, of course, protect our children. Great. Now, if you want to use social media, show me your ID. Great. Now you've got a digital ID. Thank you very much. We can tie it to your social media. We know who you are. We know what you talk about, and we can prosecute you now. And
of course, people who don't want phones, I know several people who still don't have a mobile phone because they don't want one. They're going to be excluded.
Yeah.
They're going to be forced to get a device. Can you imagine 20 years ago, or whenever mobile phones first came in, if the government said, look, here's what we want to do. We want to get this device and we want it to attach it to you. You must carry it around at all times. Bring it to bed with you. When you go out, bring it with you. Don't ever leave it at home. And we can pick up on what you're doing, your movements, where you go, and we'll use it to send you ads and to track your every movement. How do you fancy doing that? Everyone would say no.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's exactly what they're doing.
But they've made it our choice to do it.
They've made it attractive and addictive. And yes, it's your choice, except it's not your choice.
No.
You've been coerced into doing that without even realising.
Yeah.
And now, people have meltdowns if they leave their phone at home.
Oh, massive loads of anxiety around. I mean, I've gone through stages of my life when I was like, where's my phone?
Yeah.
Where's my phone? I've left my phone. I have to go back.
What's the first thing that people do when they wake up in the morning?
Yes, where's my phone? Yeah.
I've done it myself. And it's terrible because if it is the first thing you do, if I think I'll just go on X and put a couple of posts up and just see what's going on, suddenly it's 5 hours later.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my God.
And you're so stimulated.
Yeah.
And then you're popping sleeping pills at night so that you can drift off to sleep. I know so many people that do. Yeah. It's just because they're staring at that blue light on their phone and they're overstimulated by it. And
we all know what's
kids
happening,
off it.
but we're all addicted to it now.
I know.
And you see what happens to young children when they have if they're punished by having their Xbox taken away or their phone removed for half an hour. They just have complete meltdowns.
My thing is YouTube Shorts. Now, I use YouTube a lot. I mean, I think it's a great way, especially if you're trying to learn something new or you don't know how to do something. It can be a very useful tool. So I don't want to ban my children from using YouTube completely, but YouTube Shorts and things like that are just absolutely horrific.
And the TikTok, obviously.
And TikTok.
I just said the TikTok, like a person of 90.
Yes, that old TikTok, yes.
Like the Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, well, that's now being bought by Oracle, isn't it? So you won't be able to trust. That's Larry, what's his face? So I wouldn't touch that with a barge pole.
I was speaking to a woman
Mr.
recently.
Surveillance himself.
And she's absolutely convinced that too much screen time caused her son's suicide. She said it just addled his brain completely. He was like 19 or something. She said there was nothing wrong, but he was totally addicted
Yeah.
to watching TikToks, videos, just scrolling.
Well, it's a
constantly.
drug hit.
Yeah.
It's a dopamine hit.
Yeah.
It's the same as taking a drug.
And I sometimes say, I've got 4 adult children. I might, if I'm with my son, for example, I'm like, oh, what are you watching? What are you looking at? He's like, oh, nothing. I'm like, what do you mean nothing? I'm just scrolling, looking. It's like, what's that? He's like, I don't know. It's weird,
Getting
isn't it?
stimulated
Yeah.
and avoiding that other connection. That real proper human connection.
Yes.
Sitting down, having a conversation one-on-one like this rather than texting somebody.
Yeah.
I was doing it the other day, and I was texting somebody for like an hour. I was like, "Why aren't we talking on the phone?"
I know.
Was like,
What's happened?
Hello,
to phone
how are you?
calls?
You all right? You had a good day?
Yeah.
But-
Oh no. If your landline rings, it's like,
Oh God.
Oh my God.
That's never a good. That's never a good thing. That's always just somebody that wants some money.
Yeah, but not like the old days. But I remember in the old days when I used to say to my dad, "Oh, that company owes me money," and I've been phoning. This is before you could text or email. He'd go to the office and knock on their door and go in and ask them face to face. That'll work. And I've actually been saying to people that I know, younger people now, if they say, "Oh God, that company owes me money," I'm like, phone them. That'll scare them. Because she's like, oh, my daughter was saying, I've emailed an email, not had a reply. I've sent loads of messages, and I'm like, phone them on their phone number.
Yes. Well, but also loads of them don't even have that anymore.
No, but you can imagine all the editors in all the newspaper and magazine offices, and they've got these landlines, and they're covered in cobwebs, and it rings one day, and they're all like, and they tend to pick it up, going, "Hello." And it's like, where's my money? I doubt if they'd even answer these days.
No. I say loads of companies. I mean, I was dealing with a camera company, and there's a problem with one of my cameras, and I tried to get hold of them. They don't have a telephone number. You can't get hold of somebody, and you can only do it via email. And I think half the time the responses you get nowadays are from AI anyway.
And then everything's obviously kept and recorded. And in the case of crime, that's great. You can just check people's WhatsApps, and you can check their emails and their phone records. And so for crime solving, it's great. But for your average person, I did think on the plus side, a lot of people are really good at writing now, which is good because they're constantly writing, constantly texting and messaging. And most people can write quite well now. Whereas probably back when I was a teenager, not many people were that good at writing.
But can they spell? Because as soon as you start typing it, it finishes the word for you.
Yeah. So it looks like they can spell.
Yeah.
But no, if they had a spelling test, an
Yeah,
old-fashioned
they'd fail.
they'd
Get
fail
them to
miserably.
write using a pen and see what their handwriting looks like.
That's me. Or
That's
something
me
like that.
too.
Someone asked me to sign a copy of this book, and I'm like, you really don't want
No.
to see that, you know?
No.
And I suddenly realised as well, I've got a signature that I use on contracts and on checks, and I don't use checks, but you know, your average sort of signature. I haven't got an autograph.
No.
So it's like, I need something a bit flowery and curly. But no. So one woman, I said, I've signed it for you, but you can hardly read it. It looks like a real mess. And she was like, oh no, it's fine.
It's fine.
It's like, you've ruined my book.
Yeah, get out.
So I'm going to have to practice my autograph.
One of my old regulars, I used to run pubs, and one of my old regulars used to be Bob the Cat Bevan, who was quite famous as an after-dinner speaker and sports pundit. And he gave me a copy of his book once, and it was signed. He goes, here you go, Digby, it's signed. If you can find one that isn't signed, it's worth a fortune.
That's good. I like that. But yeah, so just to fill you in since then, because I am focusing way too much on very particular instances, I made a second film. Actually, I made the first film in 2021. Mm-hmm. My dad was killed at home by paramedics. I've got not enough evidence to prove that. I went to the police about it. Long story. I've got the whole story written up. David Icke published it on his website. It's on there if anyone wants to read it, what happened. Awful. I contacted the police, said I think my dad's been murdered. The police said we'll look into it. And we toed and froed. They didn't want a statement from me, even though I had a lot to say about that particular day. Obviously, Operation Talla was in place at that point. I didn't know. This was September 21. Anyway, just this week, I contacted the same police officer, who's amazingly on the same email. And I also contacted the Metropolitan Police, a Freedom of Information request, asking about why they're operating at this time under Operation Talla. They've both replied, so that the Freedom of Information request is being processed. And the police officer who's investigating my dad, pretending to investigate my dad's case, replied and said, that she'll be helpful, but she can't comment on Operation Talla. I'd have to do an FOI request for that. I said, I've already done that. I said, I don't want you to reopen my dad's case. It's 4 years ago now. But I would like to know why it wasn't properly investigated, that's all. So that was yesterday I replied.
Do you mind saying what happened that made you think that? Or what happened to your
okay,
father?
I can tell you. So my dad wasn't feeling well. His carer called an ambulance. She said he was coughing. He didn't have a cough, but she said he was like kind of choking a bit. Mm-hmm. But my dad used to eat very fast, so he could have been choking on a bit of toast or something, for all I know. And I just said to her on the phone, I'm coming up anyway this weekend. I'll come up now. But if you feel better calling an ambulance, just tell them to check his airways, make sure there's no blockages, and to maybe give him some oxygen. But don't let them give him anything else. Don't let them inject him with anything, because at this point I knew. My dad knew about my film. My dad used to say to me, "Oh, they're not going to do that to me, are they?" And I'm like, "Of course not, Dad. I know all about this. There's no way I'd let you now go back into a hospital or a care home. You're safe at home. Your care is big and strong. She's not going to let them harm you. She won't." Anyway, so the paramedics arrived. As soon as they got there, I spoke to the lead paramedic, a young guy, and I said, "Just listen to me carefully. I've got power of attorney for my dad, health and welfare and finances. So you need to listen to what I'm saying. Do not inject him with anything. Don't give him any drugs. Just check his airways, maybe give him some oxygen, and I'm going to be there in an hour." I was sitting in the car outside here having this phone call, waiting to go. And he said, "Well, we're going to make him comfortable." And I said, "No, you're not going to make him comfortable." I said, "I know what that means. It's a euphemism, and you're not going to make him comfortable." He said, "You don't want your dad to be comfortable." I said, "Not in the way that you want to make him comfortable, no. This is a common euphemism that I use, make them comfortable. It means give them the end of life drugs." I said, "Don't give." He said, "We'd like to give him some glycopyrronium bromide." And I said, "I've never heard of it. What is it?" They said, "It just dries up the secretions in the throat." So I'm thinking, oh, that's some oral medication, obviously. Yep. I said, "Okay, give him that, but nothing else, okay?" And they said, "Fine." So I start driving, and it's on the day of the petrol shortage. Do you remember? So it was the 24th of September, 2021. And I noticed I've only got like half a tank of petrol, thinking this is going to, hopefully get me there. But I don't know how I'm going to get back, because we didn't know how long the petrol shortage was going to go on for. It was only a day, as it turned out. Anyway, I'm halfway up the motorway, and I'd said to my daughter, while I'm driving, "Can you keep ringing, make sure he's okay?" Because I didn't want to leave him unattended for a minute, So she's ringing me on the phone over and over, and I'm driving. So I pull into Clackett Lane Services and ring her back, and she said, "Granddad's gone." And I'm like, "Gone where?" And she said, "He's dead." And I'm like, "What do you mean he's dead?" She said, "A paramedic just phoned me," and I just phoned, she said, "and then they said he's dead." So I rang the house immediately. Paramedic came to the phone, a female paramedic. And she went, "Oh, I'm really sorry about..." I said, "Look, never mind that. What did you give him?" She said, "Oh, no, we didn't give him anything." I said, What did you give him? What happened? Why is he dead? What do you mean he's dead? What the hell?" And she's like, "Oh, he just died." And I'm like, "Of what?" She said, "Well, we didn't have a chance to give him anything. He just died." And I'm like, "What do you mean he just died? People don't just die." And she was like, "Oh, well, he was very ill, wasn't he?" I said, "No, he wasn't very ill." Anyway, it turns out they had phoned my dad's GP for instruction what to do with this 78-year-old man who was recovering from another stroke. Sadly, he'd had a minor stroke this time, was in bed. And my dad's GP wasn't there, so they spoke to another GP who didn't know my dad at all. Now, whether this GP was reading someone else's notes and got the wrong guy, or whether he was just stupid or just malicious, this GP told the paramedics that my dad had cancer, that he was having palliative care, and that he was at end of life, and to proceed with the process. But none of those three things are true. My dad didn't have cancer.
So the paramedic lied as well on the phone and said that they didn't give him anything when they did.
Yeah. So I rang back again, and anyway, it turns out they injected him with something, right? So my dad's carer said she'd been sent out of the room when the paramedics arrived, but she was listening through the door and could see through the crack in the door and was watching. And she said they had their backs to her, but she could hear them talking about Midazolam. Shall we give him 5 or 10 milligrams? And she's thinking, he can't have that. But she's watching, and she sees them rustling around. And then when she's allowed back in, she said my dad's arm was out over the covers where it had been under before, and his sleeve was rolled up. And she's thought they've injected him with something. So when I put that to them, they said, yes, they'd injected him with glycopyrronium bromide. And I said, I thought that was the oral thing. They said, no, we inject it. And I said, well, he must have had a fatal reaction to that. What happened? It was a terribly undignified death. He died not long after they gave him the injection. He must have been terrified of these people in masks and gloves injecting him against his will. My dad wouldn't have had any injection. He didn't want the jabs, he didn't have any of the vaccines. So he would not have agreed to that. And then he died. And it was very strange because the last time I'd seen him was 6 days before that. I'd seen him the previous weekend. And he said to me, I've got a funny feeling I'm going to die soon. And I said, why have you got that feeling? He said, I don't know, I just have. I said, what are you going to die of? And he was like, I don't know. He said, have I got anything? Have I got cancer or anything like that? And I was like, no, you haven't got anything. I said, you're fine, you're recovering, you're going to be well soon. And he was like, I've just got this really weird feeling. And I said, well, how does that make you feel? And he thought for ages and he went, a bit nervous. And I said, yeah, sort of fear of the unknown, isn't it? I said, you're not going to die, don't worry. But he was right.
Yeah.
They came and got him. He was a bit psychic, my dad, I must say. But 78 years old, recovering from a stroke, no terminal illness, appetite like a horse. He would eat like a horse, seriously. Really healthy in every other way. Just his brain was recovering from the stroke. And they did that to him. And the police, 8 months after I reported it, I said, what's happening? And they said, oh, we've closed the case. And I said, why? They said, well, there was no other avenues of investigation. I said, we didn't investigate at all.
No, did they do a toxicology? Did they test his blood post-mortem?
No, they didn't want a statement from me.
No.
They said because I wasn't in the room at the time, it would just be hearsay.
But she already lied and said we never got round to giving him anything.
Yeah. And then I got the ambulance reports. I got the first one, and it's like it said there were 6 paramedics there. None of the names matched the people I spoke to. I'm like, this is all wrong. This is someone else's report. What the hell? They sent me another one, riddled with mistakes again, and they sent me a third one. I'm just like, do you know what? It's got so many mistakes. I started to read through it, underlining the mistakes, thinking there's so many, I just can't even be bothered to do this.
Yeah.
By this time, I'm having to organise a funeral and stuff single-handedly, and dealing with all relatives coming from Ireland, and they'd put on the death certificate cancer of the small, carcinoma of the small intestine, and I'm like, my dad didn't have cancer, and the doctor was like, well, and I said, I need that changed. At least they didn't put COVID on the death certificate. They wouldn't have dared, but, and then the registry office said, oh, it's going to take a certain amount of time to change it if you want a new one issued. And then I had all the Irish relatives saying, we've booked time off work, we've booked our flights. And I'm like, oh God, the pressure's enormous. And I thought, do you know what? Just leave it. I don't care. And then I had my dad came to me in a dream shortly after saying, just leave it. And I thought, okay. And I decided, because I didn't have enough evidence, really, although did say to my dad's carer, "Are you sure he was injected with something?" She said, "Yeah." And I said, "Okay, there will be some evidence around." In fact, a friend of mine said, "Tell her to look for evidence, anything." So she went through the bins and stuff. And then in the outside bin, she found a syringe wrapper, but all that proves is that somebody took a syringe out of a packet.
Yeah, they don't.
So,
it doesn't say what they did with it.
No, but, if we had done toxicology and stuff. But my dad's body was carted off pretty much immediately. So I went to the funeral home and, that's time 6 days before he died was the last time I saw him in person. I actually videoed him when we had that conversation as well. And it was really quite sad, but I don't like to watch it now, but I do still have it. So when I was at the funeral home, they said, "You could see your dad if you want." And I'm like, I don't really need to, But so I don't know what state he was in, or even if he was there. I don't know what they did with him. I saw a coffin at the funeral. Was he in there? I don't know. This is something I've been talking to, because I set up a support group in 2021 and it's got nearly 200 people in there now. And we all who've been through similar things and lost their loved one in similar ways. But we were talking the other day about, at that time, because of fear of contagion of the killer virus, coffins were sealed. People didn't get to see their loved ones at all.
Yeah.
In the book, one woman, Rosalind, her son there, he was 48, and he was in a mental health facility, and he died suddenly for no reason. He was a healthy young man, just having mental issues. And she said she wasn't allowed to go and see him. The coffin was sealed. At the funeral, she noticed the coffin was really big. So she said to the funeral guy, "Why is he in such a big coffin?" And he said, "Oh, he's a big lad, 6'5" I measured him at. She was like, "He was 5'4" and very slight. He wasn't a big man." So she's thinking, who's in that coffin? And
God. And
her husband helped carry the coffin, and he said it was so heavy they nearly dropped it. So what or who was in that coffin? Someone said to me, this just because I was posting about it the other day, starting a discussion about it, and a lot of people are now questioning, I don't know if my mum was in that coffin. I don't know. We just don't know. Maybe they took the bodies. It's like
could be anything.
Real life invasion.
Could be weights. Could be anything.
Invasion of the body snatchers. They could have been taking the bodies. Someone said in a comment the other day about that young guy, "Oh, maybe they took his body for organs and put some fat old man in there instead, whose organs weren't of any use." We don't know. And it's so horrendous to think about. When you start talking about it in normal circles, people who have no clue, they're just like, "Oh my God, she's really lost the plot now," She's talking about, all this kind of stuff, invasion of the body snatchers. But nothing surprises me anymore.
Well, it all goes on around the world, doesn't it? And a lot of it has happened in Ukraine recently with the Ukraine war and organs being trafficked out of there. And I think there's a lot of really horrible, sick stuff that's going on around the world. And I think that's one of the things that was so enlightening about talking to Andrew Bridgen when I spoke to him a couple of weeks ago, was because I've suspected a lot of this stuff for a long time, and then hearing somebody who was an ex-MP who was an MP for 10, 12 years, maybe a bit longer, to hear him saying these things and confirming it, I think made a real difference. And I think it made a real difference to a lot of people. This stuff does go on. But of course, Andrew was billed as a conspiracy theorist very early on, because he started speaking out about vaccine harms. He also came on board with the whole involuntary euthanasia thing, because someone I was helping and working with, who lost his father, the guy that came to the meetings with me, with the news editors and medical editor, he decided to approach Andrew Bridgen, and we arranged a meeting in Parliament with Andrew Bridgen and 42 families who all came along to this big meeting, and Andrew was there, the families were there. I invited all the families' MPs as well. 2 of them turned up in the room but didn't stay long. One of them was
I can't remember their names now. One was Ruth Cadbury, and the other guy, I can't remember his name. But there was a third one that came to the door and looked in and then left. So anyway, MPs aren't interested, but Andrew is on board with this, and he has spoken out about it. I don't think did he speak about it in your interview? Don't think he did. About the Midazolam murders, as we call
absolutely.
them. Yes,
yeah. In great detail.
Yeah.
Midazolam, morphine. We talked.
Yes, he did. Sorry, I did see that section. Yeah.
It was important for a lot of people. I think that's one of the reasons why it got shared so much is everybody started listening going, hang on a second, this guy was an MP and he's now saying
Yeah.
And I know that he said it for a long time, but I think everybody's ready to start listening.
But he was great at that meeting. He listened to the families, and he actually said that this was June the 13th or the 14th, 2023. He said he would take it to the House of Commons, and exactly a week and a day later, because it was my dad's birthday, 22nd of June, 2023, he spoke to Penny Mordaunt about it, and that was filmed. I don't know if it was televised.
I watched it today, actually.
Oh, did you?
He shared it today on X, and she just dresses him down and says, "You're making it dangerous for everybody, and you're risking people's lives."
Yeah.
As in other MPs.
Yeah. But at least he did do what he said he was going to do, and he has been on board with this. And I know he's very much on board with all the vaccine injured and bereaved. So he's doing the right thing. But because he's doing the right thing, and because I'm doing the right thing, because a lot of other people are doing the right thing. At the start, we were just, all tarred with the same conspiracy theory brush. So the mainstream, if I said to the Telegraph, but Andrew Bridgen says about the vaccines, oh yeah, we don't listen to him. He's a crazy conspiracy theorist. Who's very, very unpopular with the other MPs, Of course he is, because he's the only one speaking out, but he's a dog with a bone as well. I'm a dog with a bone. And every so often I think, I've got to stop doing this now, because it is quite draining and quite exhausting. Because I've made a second film called Playing God, which is about medical democide in the UK over the last 50 years. I love that film. I really like that film, but it's heartbreaking as well at the same time. We had 5 or 6 case studies talking straight to the camera. It's very raw, really emotional, about loved ones who've died because of government policies, basically. So a vaccine death, a Midazolam murder, a child who died in a drug trial that, the parents didn't even know she was put on. And it goes back like over 50-year period. We also had experts. We had Dr. Patrick Policino. I had him in the first film as well. He's a retired neurologist and a Catholic priest, and he speaks very nicely about, the whole sort of ethics and almost the religious side of the terrible thing of cutting someone's life short like that, how people don't have time to prepare, when they're murdered. Anna de Buisseret, who's an old friend of mine, she's the lawyer. She speaks beautifully and eloquently in that film as well. Sadly, she died November the 30th, 2024, very young, of cancer. And we had Dr. Kevin Corbett in it, who's an expert on all this kind of stuff from a medical point of view. So I love that. That is a really good film, and it's worth watching. It's platformed on Children's Health Defence and on UK Column, but it's also on Rumble. And then the third film I made last year is called Unseen. It's like a whole extension of the first film, up to date, up to 2025. That came out last July. Amazingly, that's on YouTube. I don't know, it hasn't been taken down.
I think YouTube have got a bit better in the sense of, I think if you're not outright saying this is an alternative medicine and this will cure you, and you're not making statements like that, I think you're okay. Yeah. I mean, they've given loads of people back their YouTube channels at the end of last year as well. Yes, they did, yeah. And certainly my interview with Andrew is on YouTube. And actually, I purposely put that on a brand new YouTube channel with 0 subscribers because I was like, I'm not putting it on my other channel because it could get the whole channel taken down. Yes, good point, yeah. But that says a lot, doesn't it? The fact that they're like, okay, we can give you a channel back now. Yeah. The same, I was banned on Twitter as it was then
for 16 months because I was talking about vaccine injury and vaccine death quite a lot, and I was suddenly shut down. And it was called a permanent suspension. So I just thought, I'll just have to go back onto Facebook. But on Facebook, in a 13-month period, I had 11 30-day bans. And it's like, as soon as I'd go back and post a picture of kittens in a basket, they'd shut me down again. Yeah. It could be anything. I'd post something that 1,000 other people had posted, but they'd shut me down straight away. And it was getting ridiculous. So yeah, it was quite nice being off social media for a short period of time. But then obviously when Elon Musk took over in 2023, wasn't it? January, I was suddenly back. Yeah. And I had like hardly any followers again. I think I had about 14,000 at that point, but most of them had gone. Or I had to kind of start again. But I've got like 66.3 now, last time I looked. Going to be 666 soon. That's going to go down well.
Let's get past that quite quickly, hopefully.
So,
and you're working on something new now as well. You're working on another documentary now.
So I'm promoting this book, obviously Murdered by the State, and it's all about all the stuff we've just been talking about, NG163 and the killing and the culling in care homes and hospitals. And this is 42 personal accounts. It's got an intro by me. It's got a foreword by author Richard Cox, who helped me edit the book as well, which is really good. It's like 25 pages with facts and figures and graphs.
Nice.
And
yeah, I saw you you had you've done a couple of shows with him now, and I saw the one you did with Mark.
Yeah, he's really good. Oh yeah, I did one with Mark. We did one with Callie Spell the other day, and we did one with a guy called Richard who runs a channel called Strange Planet on YouTube. I think he's American or Canadian. And that went really well. And I did one with David Vance the other day as well. We're doing a lot at the moment. Nice. Doing another one. We're doing a Spaces on X on Tuesday evening, and then on Wednesday we're doing something with another.
They're good
American
as long as you've
guy.
got a good host that sort of moderates people properly. Otherwise, they can get out of hand quite quickly.
I know. I've been on one before, and I was like, and I stayed for a bit and left. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'll give it another try because I want to set one up as well myself. Yeah. Because I've got a community called MBTS, Murdered by the State Book Club. So anyone who wants to talk to the people who've contributed to the book, they can join that community. It's at the top of my page on X. So I'm trying to promote that book, and I'm also, oddly, and I meant to mention this before when we were talking about organ harvesting and stuff. I only found this out this week that the whole MAID system in Canada, medical assistance in dying, which is totally got out of hand now. There's people being euthanized because they're poor. People being euthanized because they've got a headache. Practically, it's gone mad. Children being allowed to apply for it, and of course that news story recently. The old man who was caring for his wife and couldn't manage anymore, so he kind of said to her, "What do you reckon about being euthanized?" And she's like, "Yeah, okay." And then when it came to it, she said, "Actually, no, I don't want to do that. I've changed my mind." And they did it anyway because he was a bit tired, burnt out, they said. Yeah. But the reason I brought that up is, weirdly, the whole organ donation thing and organ harvesting and all stuff about brain death is something I've been interested in for a long, long time, and I've spoken out about on social media on and off for the last 10 years because of the stuff I found out. I thought people need to know this. So I thought my next documentary will be about that. And I'm just slowly finding out that they're linked. So if you sign up for MAID in Canada, for example, you've got to say you're willing for your organs to be taken. Yeah. And of course, they changed the law here in May 2020, where they
have to opt
it's
out
now an opt-out system instead of an opt-in system. And a lot of people still don't. I mentioned that to a woman of my age the other day. She went, "Well," I said, "because you're an organ donor." She went, "Oh, no, I haven't applied for that." And I said, "No, you are." And told her, and she said, "I didn't know that." Most people don't know that.
I think people don't really understand the full circumstances in which organ donation happens as well, because you can't just die and then they go, "Oh, well, we'll use their organs." Your body has to be alive.
You have to be alive. And that's something that, I mean, when I was, I did a couple of interviews. So I'm doing a new documentary. It's called The Gift of Life, ? And it covers all those very controversial subjects. So all about organ donation, all about organ harvesting. I'm not covering organ trafficking because that's a massive subject and terrifying. Yeah. That would be a whole separate story. but also the controversy surrounding brain death, what it is, does it actually exist, is it a myth? Dr. Heidi Klessig is going to be featured in the film. She's written a book called The Brain Death Fallacy. I interviewed Holly Dance yesterday, who's the mother of Archie Battersby, the little boy that was executed, is the word that she uses and that I use, because they said he was brain dead. She wouldn't allow them to do a brainstem test, so that he didn't have any kind of brainstem test. They decided via an MRI diagnosis that he was brain dead. She knows he wasn't. He was holding her hand. He was squeezing her fingers. He had tears running down his face. She had 22 court hearings trying to stop the hospital from killing him. And then they witnessed him being executed. And one thing she said to me yesterday during the interview, and this is something that I would say all of these people experienced as well, their families, coldness from the medics.
There we go again. Right, we are back. Sorry about that. We had a battery go. We've been going for quite some time. Let's wrap it up. So your book, tell people finally about it, where they can get it, and how they can support you with all the projects that you've got going on.
Yeah, so it's called Murdered by the State. It's published by Mark Atwood and Abby Wynn's publishing company, 104 Publishing Limited. And I'll send you the link so people can use that link to get to order the books. It comes in lots of different formats as well. So we've got an audio book. That's something I wanted to talk about briefly, because it's not like any other audiobook you've ever heard. My idea was to get all the people who've told their stories in the book, all 42 of them, to narrate the stories. Now, of course, Mark and Richard, who worked with me on the book, said that's going to be a logistical nightmare. That's not going to work. How are we going to get, 42 people from all over the country into a studio? No. Get them to record it at home? They haven't got the right equipment. It's not going to work. But I thought, let's give it a go anyway. It was a lot of work. A lot of people couldn't do it.
Yep.
They just couldn't, either for emotional or practical reasons. So the people who couldn't do it, I got some friends to step in. A couple of them are actors, have good voices for that kind of thing. But I didn't want them to sound like actors. I wanted them to sound like normal people. So got my friend Ashley to do a few. My friend Wolf is actually a professional actor. My friend Andy is a professional voiceover artist, but they were great. They were all good. So they kind of filled in the gaps. But the majority of people did read their own story. It's a really painful listen when you...
I can imagine.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, I know the stories off by heart now, but I listened to the audio book, and literally after the first story, I was choked up and in tears, even though I know the story. So if you haven't heard the story before, I mean, the first story is by a lady called Michelle Roberts, and it's about her brother being murdered in hospital. The title of it is, "He hated the mask and kept pulling it off. Staff threatened to glue it to his beard."
Oh, my Lord.
This is a young guy in hospital, her brother. So I've used a quote as the title for each chapter, and they're all listed. In fact, Mark Atwood did a video where he read out every single title, all 42 of the titles. But reading through those or listening to those is hard enough. But reading the stories, some people have said, I've got the book, I'm reading one story a week because that's all I can manage.
Yeah, quite.
Other people have got the book, said, I've read the whole book in one sitting. Absolutely devastating, It is shocking. So, and the other project I'm working on, I mentioned, is The Gift of Life, which is about organ donation, organ harvesting, and the controversy around brain death. As I've mentioned, I've interviewed... we've got Dr. Heidi Klessig. I've asked Dr. Andrew Kaufman if he'll do it, but I haven't heard back from him yet. I want to have a good assortment. I want to look at it from all points of view. It's not going to be biased one way or the other. I've interviewed Holly Dance, Archie Battersby's mum, and Emma Price, who was, as I just mentioned, brain dead, but then woke up.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted most of it to be focused on the UK, but we've got American experts and doctors and people involved as well. So, Yeah, it's in the early stages, and I'm crowdfunding that, so I can give you the link to that as well.
Yeah, I'll put that in.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important film because there's so much about these issues that people just don't know. A lot of people think it's a great thing to be an organ donor. A lot of people don't realise that they're organ donors since the law changed, as we mentioned earlier. Yeah, we're all organ donors unless you actively opt out. So.
Yeah, and they don't realise the circumstances.
They don't know what it involves.
Still alive.
No, and when I remember many years ago, I was posting about it on Facebook, saying, you know, that the body has to be alive and breathing with the heart beating for any organs to be taken. And I was in one journalist group, and they all descended upon me, just saying, why are you trying to stop people being organ donors? It's disgusting. You know, you're depriving people, blah, blah, blah. And in another thread on Facebook years ago, I remember one woman saying, my dad is dead. He donated organs. He donated his eyes. Are you telling me that he was awake while they removed his eyes? And I'm like, he was alive, definitely. She's like, I don't want to hear that. Why are you telling these horrible things to people? It's like, so I am always
ignorance
torn.
is bliss. Apparently.
Yeah, apparently. But you know, I don't know. I'm always torn. Should I tell this? Like, I've got a friend who doesn't want to read the book. You know, she said, I don't believe that happens, and I'm like, fair enough. I've got other friends who are very sensitive and suffer from anxiety and depression, and that will make them worse. You know, and they're like, oh, shall I get your book? And I'm like, no,
no, don't, please.
But I should be saying yes.
Yeah.
But then, you know, I don't want to be responsible for depressing people. No. And I am the messenger that gets shot over and over and over. And I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but for some reason I'm doing that. And I feel it's my duty to just inform people of what's really going on. And it's kind of whether they like it or not.
Yeah, quite. Jacqui, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.